we've been continuing our work to improve the woodland habitat here at the Proving Grounds 2. In this stage, we're using a slightly different or newer technique. This area was just chock full of 1 to 3 inch saplings, stump sprouts, underneath the canopy of these much older, more mature trees. There was a mid-layer in here that was almost excluding all sun from reaching the ground. Now there's a canopy up here, but it was spaced out enough that there would be some sun coming through, except for all these 2 and 3 inch saplings that were just taking all the sun's energy and resulting in just a brown layer of leaves below that. So we came through with the steel chainsaw and just cut all those, unless it was a white oak or a species that's not common in this wood lot, felled them relatively close to the ground, and then treated the stump with the same herbicide mixture we commonly use. 50% Garlon 3A, 40% water, and 10% Arsenal AC. The generics of those, as I've shared previously, work just fine and cost less. Again, my goal is to restore a savanna habitat here. This is mainly post oaks in this area, and that means getting some sun to the ground and then use fire to stimulate the growth of those native grasses and forbs. That native seed bank should still be intact in this soil, and those are the plants that are best adapted. They've been growing here for hundreds or thousands of years. They're best adapted not only to this site and these soil conditions, but also to the wildlife populations in these areas. You may be thinking, well, Grant, why didn't you fell the bigger trees also to get more sunlight down rather than use the girdle and spray technique you shared with us recently? And that's a fair question, but when we felled these little saplings and then we take time to cut them in 2 or 3 lengths or cut them up so they dry quicker, a much higher percentage of those will be consumed by the first prescribed fire. If we were felling 6, 8, 10, 12 inch trees, laying them on the ground, they're not going to be consumed for several years with prescribed fire. And it's a real booger walking through an area where you're stepping over those big trees all the time, or dragging a deer out there over trees step after step. There's also an aesthetic difference. We took this mid-story out. You could just see all these trees behind us. That's very rare unless you're looking at an older growth closed canopy forest. And the first time my wife and daughters drove by, man, they texted me and said, "Ooh, that looks really good. We like that." Now, they weren't thinking more grasses and forbs and more fawn and turkey poult habitat and bigger antlers down the road. Just instantly, their thoughts told them that this was much more aesthetically pleasing than what it was.
Growing Deer is brought to you by Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's. Also by Green Cover Food Plots, Winchester, PH Outdoors, Moultrie Mobile, Steel, Fleet Outdoor Apparel, Morel Targets, Fourth Arrow, Scorpion Venom Archery, Case IH Tractors, Ward Laboratories, Burris Optics, G5 Broadheads, Prime Bows, and Redneck Hunting Blinds.
Some forests will have such a closed canopy forest that taking out this understory won't add much more light to the forest floor. But when we look around here, there's a bunch of light. I don't know, maybe approaching that 30% mark, and 30 to 50% is where I like it. That's enough light coming to the ground to grow a lot of quality forage, and on the other side, not encourage so many hardwood saplings to grow that just becomes a jungle again. And by using herbicide to terminate these smaller mid-story trees, we're not going to get a lot of stump sprouts. And that means a prescribed fire would do a great job of keeping this area in really productive habitat. Once we completed felling all this mid-story, and I'm seeing this much light come through about midday, I may wait a year before we come back in here and do a bunch of girdle and squirt to see what kind of vegetative response we get. It's much easier to take these smaller trees out in the mid-story, consume most of that debris up with the prescribed fire, than to girdle and spray a great big tree and it's standing dead for a while and could potentially be a problem when we do a prescribed fire and it catches on fire and it's flaming 40 feet tall. That is a great technique, and we will certainly be using it here at the Proving Grounds 2 and recommend it frequently to the landowners we assist. But in this case, the trees were spread out enough that it obviously allowed enough light for all these hickories and smaller oaks to grow in the understory, and it may be enough light to encourage those native grasses and forbs to grow. We won't know for sure right now because there's still pretty good leaf cover all over the ground. And until we use a prescribed fire and consume that leaf cover and some of the canopies of all the leaves of these saplings we fell to the ground, then we can get a true measure of what kind of response we get from the native seed bank. I think a good comparison is I was just out in Maryland assisting a landowner. Brian was a great guy, had about 100 acres out there, but it was almost all a closed canopy forest. Walking around Brian's property, and they'd worked on, just starting to work on, I should say, making some bedding areas, sticking stuff up. Great idea, what I would have prescribed. And they girdled, but they got all these sprouts coming out the base of the tree. This is a maple. You can see the maple leaves are heavily browsed. But your intention was to kill this, right?
Yes, it was.
And it's not dead. And I was just asking questions. You gotta be polite when you're out there doing these things, folks. So, but they use Roundup or glyphosate. Well, glyphosate doesn't kill a lot of trees. It top killed or set this back a good bit, wounded it a lot. But it's not dead. And if you let that grow, it's gonna be a mess, right? You gotta, I don't know, 50 or 100 stems coming off there. At some time they get where they don't taste well and deer won't eat them, it'll get real tall and bushy. You can't see through there, you can't shoot there with the bow, whatever. So if we're gonna do this work, you know, a lot of labor, we're gonna use what a lot of people call the Harper, Craig Harper mixture. We're gonna use 50% Garlon 3A, not 4, 3A, 40% water, and 10% Arsenal AC. The generics, those work fine. You can buy them online. You mix the Garlon and water first. If you mix Garlon and Arsenal, it'll kind of gel up, be unusable basically. This was good work, but we're gonna use a different herbicide and maybe change some techniques a little bit as we go on through, and we'll keep you posted. We'll be sharing more information from landowners we assist. Tomorrow I'm headed to Arkansas, and Daniel and I are getting ready to head to Georgia and South Carolina to assist some landowners later this week. I really enjoy meeting people that, you know, are interested in improving their land, improving the wildlife quality there, and the hunting quality also, and sharing techniques from them. I usually learn from them also. But even more important than learning about improving wildlife habitat and hunting quality is to learn about God's will for our life and that we actually apply it daily. I encourage you to get in His Word and seek His will for your life. Thanks for watching Growing Deer.